welcome to the regular meeting of the Design Review Committee on Thursday, September 19th, 2024. I now call the meeting to order at 5:01 p.m. Lisa, will you start with the roll call, please?
Member Lapp, absent. Member Kavanaugh,
Present.
Member Martin,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dryden-Hess,
Here.
Chair Jacobson-Bates.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. Member Kavanaugh, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance,
Of course.
please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, can I begin by having a motion to approve the order of the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second.
Okay. Okay, having heard a motion and a second to approve the order of the agenda as presented, Elisa, roll call vote, please.
Member Lapp, absent. Member Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Member Martin,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dryden-Hess,
Yes.
Chair Jacobson-Bates.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, then we're going to move right on to consent items. And Lisa, would you please introduce this item?
Items on consent are typically routine and will be approved in one motion. The chair will call on anyone wishing to address the committee on any consent item on the agenda which has not been pulled by the committee for discussion. Each speaker will be permitted to speak only once, and comments will be limited to a total of 3 minutes.
Okay, so we're going to start with in-person public comments first. Is there anyone who would like to address an item that's not on the agenda tonight? I don't see anyone in the room. Do I see anyone on Zoom? No hands raised there, am I correct? Okay. All right, we'll move on. Do any...
Did we vote on the consent items?
No, we did not.
I think we should do that.
I think we
before vote.
should, yes. All right. I thought we had, all right. That's right, that was the order. All right, so now we're going to move on to consent items. Lisa, you did introduce that. We did have public comments. So any items that we'd like to pull? And if not, then we're going to entertain a motion to approve the consent items.
So move.
Second.
Okay, having heard a motion and a second to approve consent
To approve,
items?
Yeah, motion to approve.
Yeah. Lisa, would you please take a roll call vote?
Member Lapp, absent. Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Member Martin,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dryden-Hess,
Yes.
Chair Jacobson-Bates.
Yes. Okay, now we're going to move on to the public comment. Lisa, I think you need to introduce this item, please, for non-agenda.
The committee welcomes your input. At this time, you may address the committee on items not on the agenda. The time limit is 3 minutes.
Okay, again, public comments in the room? Seeing none. Anybody out there on Zoom that would like to make a comment? Okay, then we're going to move on to discussion items. So staff, please introduce item 4A and provide the report.
Discussion and possible action to approve a land use permit for 1697 Copenhagen Drive for proposed exterior paint color. The proposed project is categorically exempt from CEQA.
So the
Report,
applicant,
please.
yes, thank you. The applicant informed city staff after the publishing of this agenda and staff report that they wish to pull the item. So therefore, the item has been pulled from the item at this point. We're pulling the item, and no dates has been set for the return of this item.
All right, so no action. Item 4A has been removed for tonight. Then we're going to move on to item 4B and staff report, please.
Discussion and provide comments for a pre-application for the potential construction of 24 multifamily dwelling units, 2 detached accessory dwelling units located at 1524, 1532, and 154 Copenhagen Drive.
Excuse me. Is that 154, is that the correct number on that?
1540.
1540, okay. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying. It was confusing.
Sure. So this evening, this is what we considered a pre-application for 3 lots of legal record at 1524, 1532, and 1540 Copenhagen. So just to give sort of a idea of what the pre-application is to both the DRC and our attendees. So city staff uses this process to get comments from both the DRC and various city departments and divisions. So the pre-application process actually is not codified in our municipal code. However, there is a fee that's attached to it. Previously, the way the pre-application has worked is you're able to present a project to city staff in a meeting, and then we just solicit comments and go back. I've directed city staff at this point to revamp the pre-application process to instead do an internal review by all departments instead of just a meeting. So that way the city staff gets a 30-day review, if not a little bit longer, to review all the plans and then provide a comment letter back to the applicant and still hold that meeting as an optional meeting to the applicant. So city staff provides this comment letter, and in this instance, we're taking this project to before the design review committee to also solicit their input. So basically what this review includes larger ticket items to potentially focus on. So from a city staff perspective, these particularly include roadway improvements, utility improvements, and other things that might not be thought of as a part of any application, but then of course, if you have to upgrade a water or sewer line, a pretty substantial one, that could be a pretty big ticket item and cause for a refinement of a project. As a part of this review, we include reviews of existing standards contained in our municipal code, as well as other policy documents, particularly those adopted standards from Public Works and utilities. As you all know, the city staff is currently processing a zoning code update. As a part of these conversations we've had with the applicant, we did reach out and provide the applicant the July draft update of those zoning code potential amendments with the caveat that they could change. And then so again, that same caveat is still before them as a part of this letter. So what we're doing is sort of this hybrid approach of not only just giving them the ability to look at what the project looks like in today's code, what it is today if they were to submit, but also what the potential code looks like in the future. And most of those standards are kind of already been vetted by the Planning Commission and the DRC. There's a couple of them that are kind of outstanding, and the applicant does know of those at this time. So we do anticipate that the Planning Commission will have their first set of actual adoption hearings in November. And so, again, we've also notified the applicant of this. So now that you kind of hopefully understand the pre-application process, it is not a formal submittal. This isn't guaranteed any actual submittal, so I just want to couch that immediately. This doesn't mean that this is going to move forward. This can definitely morph into something completely different, but that, again, is the point of the pre-application, is to really flesh out those larger design and preliminary schemes and provide the applicant a much wider lens to then really refine whatever project that they have coming into a formal application, therefore hopefully cuts the entitlement time, because now we've really already taken a hard look at it once, and it comes back in a much easier and smoother fashion. So eventually what ends up happening is by utilizing this pre-app process, a developer can get a little bit quicker out the process into construction, particularly for residential projects or other projects that are of great economic development importance. So 2 things to sort of keep in mind as we do this pre-application process. The first one is the Housing Accountability Act. I've kind of talked to the DRC members ad nauseum about this over the last year since I've started, as well as the Planning Commission. But the Housing Accountability Act has been around for quite some time. It was amended back in 2015, 16, 17, and 19 was the last iteration. But a local agency is required to review residential projects with objective, quantifiable, written development standards, conditions, and policies. So currently, our adopted design guidelines aren't quantifiable. So that's part of the reason why we're doing a zoning ordinance amendment. The objective standards must have no personal or subjective judgment. So a great example is currently in our code, the rear setback has a numerical standard of 10 feet. However, there's a caveat into it that talks about air, light, and the subjectivity of that the Planning Commission can increase it or decrease it, et cetera. That's subjective. So at this point for a residential project, we're not really allowed to follow that. So comments that are objective, i.e. regarding setbacks, building heights, they must be adhered to the applicant. So if basically our comment is that the building percentage is needs to be less than or 30% of the lot, that's objective because it's a numerical item. There's ways to calculate that. They have to follow that. What this does is the pre-application allows us as city staff, as well as you, the DRC, this evening, to provide comments for a preferred design aesthetic. Again, ultimately, the objective standards prevail, but this is our opportunity from a city staff perspective, from a DRC perspective, is to provide that aesthetic design review in a pre-application form. So we're kind of a little bit not hamstringed by state law because it's not a formal application, but you're able to provide those comments that are more community oriented and guide and direct the applicant as necessary. The other thing to keep in mind as a part of this pre-application process, as well as the formal application process, is the applicant proposes that this potential project will utilize what's called a state density bonus. So just to give a very quick primer of what the state density bonus is, this has been enacted in 1979. This is not new. This has been around for quite some time. It allows for a property owner to increase density on a property above the maximum established for a general plan designation or zone. And it is applicable to charter cities. I know at one time, the state density bonus, there was a question of does it apply to charter cities? Does it apply to general law cities? The city of Solvang is a charter city. It very much does apply to this. The state density bonus, very similar to the Housing Accountability Act, been around for a while. However, the state legislature has been tinkering with the state density bonus law pretty much every single year since 2017. We actually do have a codified section of state density bonus in our municipal code. However, it is woefully out of whack with state law, so we don't really use it at this point. We go with what the state law says. In exchange for this additional density, and caveat, the developer doesn't necessarily have to go get additional density, by the way. They can actually be under the density threshold and still ask for a state density bonus. But in exchange for these, the state density bonus, developer must deed restrict a certain amount of units at a below market rate value, either very low, low, or moderate. In this instance, the potential project, the applicant has indicated that they propose on deed restricting 15% to very low income families or income levels, as well as 15% moderate. So about 30% total of the total project is proposed to be deed restricted below market. So what does that mean? That means that the city will receive if the project goes through and gets entitled and goes through construction, the exchanges, the city will be able to deed restrict the units for 55 years. So for the next for 55 years, these units are set aside for that income level. As a part of the state density bonus, the applicant can request what's called concessions, or what we call is a reduction or waiver of required standards. And the number of concessions are based on the percentage of affordable units. So here in this instance, there was a new law that was passed that went into effect January 1st. So in this instance, based on what they're proposing, the applicant can take up to what's called 4 concessions. So the only way a jurisdiction can deny a waiver is only if it may potentially result in a specific adverse impact upon public health, safety, welfare. So as I've sort of said on another project, a great example of that is, let's say they're proposing a 5-6-story building, and the Santa Barbara County Fire Department comes back and says, we do not have a fire apparatus that can basically put out a fire for that tall of a building. That is very much a fire, or that is very much a health, safety, welfare issue. Therefore, we could deny said project, even if a developer pushed it through. It needs to be based on the project record. It needs to be based on evidence. Can't be based on feeling. Can't be based on what you think. It can't be based on what you see. There's got to be evidence-based to that. And again, that's a concession, but again, that's further down the line, just trying to plant the seed for what is essentially going to be the future. A lot of these projects are the developers and property owners are taking advantage of the state density bonus. So it does hamstring a little bit of what city staff can and cannot deny. So the potential project, its general plan designation is high density residential. It is zoned DR20 currently, but future, as proposed by city staff, we propose on zoning this what's called R3 or high density residential. It's approximately 27,116 square feet of net acres. And again, the potential project is 24 multifamily units and 2 detached ADU units for a total of 26 units. And the potential project is approximately 3 stories in height. So for zoning consistency, city staff has provided comments on the potential project to both existing and proposed zoning ordinance. One of the examples is that under the new proposed code, this would fall under what's called a design district overlay number 1 or the village design district. However, those haven't been codified yet. Under the existing code, the potential project would require a total of 4 concessions. So those include front setback, building coverage, height, and open space. The potential project under the proposed zoning ordinance may require 1 concession, and that's height, but that's completely dependent on the Planning Commission recommendation. And then also it would need to hit the proposed objective design standards. So we've introduced those standards to you in July and August. This was actually a great way for us to check our own objective design standards and see if they work in practice. And so based on that, and in your staff report, you have a chart that's laid out. A box that labels green means it hit the objective standard. A box that's labeled red means they did not. And so in our review of it, it didn't hit window proportions. There was no lighting plan that was included. Walkway widths, there were a couple that were under 6 feet in width, and then pedestrian amenities, half timbers, and 2 of them were not hit, but we don't know where we're going to end up landing. And the first one is the height of the structure itself, and then finally the floor height. So those are the 2 that are sort of outstanding. The rest of them are kind of locked in at this point. But again, these are objective standards. They most certainly can hit those very easily. And again, under the new code, it could be reduced to basically just 1 concession. So because this is a pre-app, this is going to work a little bit differently than it normally does. So typically city staff then goes into a presentation of the actual project itself. I'm going to turn this over to the applicant who's available via Zoom, and they're going to make a presentation in regards to their proposed project to you. And then they're at the end of their presentation, we're going to take it quickly back to staff to go over our comments. And then from there, it would be best to open it up to public comment and then the DRC then to provide comments. And those comments will essentially be written down by city staff, and then we will provide those comments back out to the applicant to hopefully conclude our pre-application review. So I'd like to turn it over to the design team for the proposed project, who will make a presentation.
Thank you, Planning Manager Rafael Castillo, and good evening, members of the Design Review Committee. My name is Pooja Bhagat, and myself and my colleague Avi Middleman are here. We are the architects for the project, and we're representing the client, and would love to hear, of course, your comments as we go through this presentation. So with that, may I share my screen? So today, as you know, we are discussing the site on Copenhagen, and as Rafael had sort of mentioned, it has 3 parcels. And just to orient you, in red are the 3 parcels. 4th place dead ends into one of the parcels. And of course, this is the current zoning, which is DR20. Here you're taking a look at the site in more of a Google Earth form. There is a vacant structure on site, which was used as a single family residence. And there has been a historical study on this site, and it confirms that it does not have any significant status and is planned to be demolished. These are the existing views of the current site. As you can see from the photographs, the sidewalk and the parkway along Copenhagen are missing at the moment. There is a storm drain that is along the east edge of the property. And then there are power lines both along the east edge and the south edge of the property. And these two are going to create sort of a utility easements and sort of distances away from these utilities that will allow us to not build in those zones. The site also slopes along Copenhagen by about 3 to 4 feet as we sort of move from west to east. And then there is an overall gradation of 5 feet, where that pole is where you can see my arrow. That's where it dips about 4 feet. That's the lowest point on this site. And adjacent to the site are residential properties. This is one that's probably now more progressed in construction. That's more towards the east. And then there are residential properties just to the west. So this is a little of our sort of zoning analysis of this site, and I'm going to zoom a little bit forward as well here. There are the site basically faces north along Copenhagen, and you will see you can see sort of the topographical drainage as well, with the lowest point right towards that southeast right here where there is the storm drain. You're also seeing sort of that hatched in the hatched area right here where we cannot build because of the stormwater easement. And then in blue here along the south, both along the south edge as well as along the east edge are power lines. And if we were to sort of take from the cross arm of those power lines, that's a blue area right here where we cannot build, because usually that's the cross arm that allows us not to do any construction in that zone. There are actually beautiful views of the mountains because this, Copenhagen is much higher. And so as you walk along Copenhagen and from Mission Drive, as you're walking through 4th Street, you're actually able to see the beautiful mountains towards the south. And a little bit about the site area, which a little bit of it was already covered by Raphael. The site area is about 25,000 square feet. You already know what the zoning is and what it is going to be like. We're proposing a total of 26 units, out of which 2 of them are ADUs and 4 are very low income. 4 are affordable units, out of which 2 are very low income and 2 are moderate income. We'll talk about the parking, which is 30 stalls that we're providing per what the Assembly Bill dictates to us. We have 24 long-term and 3 short-term bicycle parking spaces, and we're requesting for 4 concessions per DR20, which actually changes, and that's already been explained by Raphael. The construction, of course, is 3 floors, type 5A construction. As we sort of read through the design guidelines that are already existing and what was shared with us by Raphael, as well as walked around this site as well, we came up with some design concepts and parameters that we thought we would share with you. These are our guiding principles. We wanted to maximize the usable open space. We wanted to create a diverse massing and an engaging roofline. We wanted to limit the wall-like appearance along Copenhagen Drive. We wanted to maintain the view corridor to the mountains and as seen from 4th Place, and visually continue the street as an urban design concept. We, of course, will be rebuilding the sidewalk and landscape along Copenhagen and provide landscape buffer and public-facing art where appropriate. We would provide street-facing and inviting courtyard, and we would relate sensitively and scale-wise to the surrounding context. So you will see that we have set back considerably from the existing residential buildings along the south and east. We've created a complementing open space to the neighbor across the street. There's a courtyard and an open space there, and we have tried to relate the height of the existing building to the west. And of course, we respect the Danish style and the materials per the design guidelines. And we've tried to break the monolithic appearance of the facade by interweaving plaster and brick veneer. So here you're seeing sort of like what we have started to design, and I'll use my pen and if I'm going a little bit too fast, please let me know, please interject. So we have maintained this sort of like visual corridor of fourth place going all the way through and continued the street as I had sort of mentioned. This also allows us to sort of not build within the utility easements that we see around this site. We've created a sort of a setback from the existing residential buildings so that, we're sort of paying respect to that. And then there is a 20-foot setback that we've sort of created between the property line to the rear as well. And then you will also see that, we've created more of a two-story ADU structure that is lower in height than the residential buildings on this side. And you'll also see that, there's this open space across the street. And so we've created a complementing open space right here as our courtyard element around which we've created the residential development. Here is our sort of a site plan, and Avi will later on walk you through the landscape site plan as well. But what we have done here is that the sidewalk along Copenhagen has, of course, has been restored. And in addition to that, we've proposed for a landscape buffer sort of all along Copenhagen, as well as we've consolidated our parking more towards this side to maximize our open space. What that has also done is that has allowed limited only one curb cut, which we think would be a very safe thing for both pedestrians and bicyclists along Copenhagen. Because we did study multiple schemes as well. We have paid attention to creating a buffer, both a landscape and an art buffer between sort of Copenhagen and the parking. And we look forward to hearing more comments on that. And then if you're a resident and you've parked in the parking lot, then you can see that the ADA entrance takes you through into the lobby and into the hallways to be able to get to the other residential units. And then this is the main lobby as well. So if you wanted to, you could sort of walk along and enter in through here. If you were a resident, you could use the courtyard to, of course, come out. And if you were coming, from Copenhagen and through the village district, you would be able to also come into the courtyard and then come in through here or through here as well. Here is a pedestrian view on the sidewalk along 4th Place with a view of the mountains that you can see in the background, which also, and as I had mentioned before, we're sort of visually allowing the street 4th Place sort of to continue, and literally that's true for the residents as well, because they'd be able to just drive all the way through. Here's another view across the street on Copenhagen facing west with the proposed sidewalk improvements, the landscape buffer. Here is a bit of a close-up view. Here you're seeing sort of that parking entrance with permeable parking pavers. You're also seeing a landscape and an art buffer. Our goal is to engage with a local artist and sort of draw inspiration from the stories of Hans Christian Andersen. These landscape walls are actually currently proposed to have a texture of loose river pebble aggregate that we see in the dry creeks around the area. And of course, we hope that these are the ones that sort of receive this interactive art that we're thinking. And of course, we develop this more as we receive feedback from you and as we progress the design forward. As we walk along Copenhagen Drive, we see that the proposed buildings with diverse roof forms and that the facade plane has also been broken to allow for both brick as well as plaster, so that there is less of a monolithic appearance. You'll also see as we walk through the building that there are overhangs that are happening at various stages. You'd see an overhang happening at the first floor to the second floor, and then again from second floor to the third floor amongst different elements. You'll see that the eaves or the roof overhang changes and varies as we go around the building, and so there's not one single eave depth, if you will, but it's more of a variety. The residential development has been organized, as I had previously spoken, sort of around a central courtyard. The taller mass, which is right there, of the elevator tower has been pushed away from the street, so it's sort of towards the rear of the courtyard, while the two-story ADU structure is closer to Copenhagen, with the idea that it has a roof line that's even lesser in height and more comparable to the residential development along the west. Another eye-level view across the street from Copenhagen, this time looking east towards the historic village core. The view shows the sidewalk, an additional landscape buffer and street trees that will provide shade in the summer along Copenhagen for a pleasant and pedestrian walk. The buffer also provides privacy to the ground floor residents. Here is a closer look at the courtyard and the entrance lobby that faces Copenhagen. Another view along the proposed newly constructed sidewalk along Copenhagen Drive. And the balconies with the wrought iron railings had been designed to overlook the central courtyard again. Here we step down from the street into the courtyard that faces the residential lobby. And you're invited in by the sound of water with a linear water feature that is carefully tucked in with the landscape buffer. Here the sidewalk is a bit higher than the courtyard, and it creates a separate communal relaxing zone away from the traffic along Copenhagen. Here is a view from the courtyard facing Copenhagen Drive with plenty of spaces to relax, read a book, have a glass of wine, and encourage, conversation and sort of community building. Here's another view from the walkway and around the second floor, framed by the balconies on either side. And again, these are also sort of designed in a way for the residents to sort of bump into one another, run into one another, and building a sense of community and conversation. And just now we come out of the courtyard. This is stepping outside along Copenhagen and 4th Place. Here you can see the roof has been designed with a perception of multiple buildings. You can also see that the stairs, you can see like one of the stairs right here are used as open air elements to separate the buildings and also to bring in more air and light. Once again, you can see that the brick and the plaster elements are interwoven to allow perception of the facade into multiple buildings and to reduce the monolithicness of it, yet still trying to achieve the Danish, old world Danish style architecture. This is now a view from the parking structure itself. You would get that view if you were a resident parking along here. You see that the dormers have been integrated with the roof, and the idea here has been to reduce the the number of downspouts, and to be able to get all of the drainage system all tied in together, and to also to allow for these Juliet balconies, which would allow for lovely views from the residences themselves. The proportion of the windows actually have been inspired by an elegant building that's actually on Mission Drive. We've forgotten the name of the building, but we're happy to pull up the photograph if you'd like. And we have tried to, of course, design the facade with with the concepts of the traditional Danish style architecture, keeping in mind that that is influenced, of course, by the timber architecture, and of course, and you can see that most of the traditional architecture of that style also had sort of a base, a middle, and sort of the top, which we have tried to maintain, and of course keep in spirit all along on all facades of the building. This is from the rear, from the south, and you can see that there is a landscape garden at the back, which our landscape architect has designed with herbs, as a herb garden, and sort of local and native fruit trees. Now my colleague Avi will speak a little bit more about the materials on the project, and will take you through the plans.
Hello, good evening. I'm Avi, I'm Pooja's colleague on this project. I'll speak a little bit, Pooja said most of it, but I'll speak a little bit more about the materials for the elevation. Of course, we're drawing all those materials from the old Northern European style. If you can see, the entire base first floor of the project is made of brick veneer in red tone. In many places, like Pooja mentioned, we specifically chose places where we can actually take the brick up, like in those recess places. Also on the other elevation facing the parking lot, where we have the exterior staircase, we're also taking the brick all the way up, just in order to break the facade. And the same thing happens on the ADU. If we go up, the second and third floors are recessed beyond, are projected over the first floor, and those floors are made of of plaster. The roof is standing metal seam roof, and we're going with oxidized copper finish for this. Now we have, of course, the element of the half timber, horizontal and vertical. We do realize we're not proposing currently any diagonal ones here, because we thought that it might make the entire look of the building too busy. But we will, of course, defer to your comments on this. We have metal rough iron in all the railings. This is for the materials. Of course, we have downspouts and gutters, all to be the same color, all metal, and to be in the same color of the half timbers, which are, well, it's hard to see them here, but they are meant to integrate with the half timber. Pooja, can we go? Yes. This is, if you can see the landscape plan. The landscape architect is not with us on the call, but I will try quickly to go through the principles here. It was very important for us to try to create a building that is kind of combined with the landscape, that has the landscape wrap around it, and of course maximize it, give as much open landscape as possible. So if we go here and along the street, Pooja mentioned this before, but we have a large buffer, green buffer. We need to, in this place, we need to, there is an elevation difference between the street of about 2-3 feet between the street and the courtyard, the large courtyard. So the way we are dealing with this is through a buffer that is both green and this elongated water feature that we think can have a great atmosphere both in the sidewalk when you pass along and in the courtyard. We are, of course, providing for green buffers between the public open space and the courtyards on the first floor. You can see that. The same goes in the back. As you go into the courtyard, you will see that the eye draws you to go through the building, through the two sections into the back side, which is all proposed to be citrus trees. And Pooja mentioned, of course, the very important buffer between the parking and the street, which will be a combination of greenery and some art element that we're proposing to work with a local artist. Now, if I go on the floor, quickly go on the floor plans. This is a floor plan on the first floor. Residents who are coming through the parking will go through the side parking directly into the lobby or to the floors. They have one elevator to use to go to the top floors, and two staircases, open staircases in two sides of the building. The yellow color that you see, the light yellow color, is all the public circulation. Oh, sorry, this one, yes. The darker yellow, orange color is all the utilities, which will include the trash room and electrical room and mechanical room and whatever is required for the building. You can see all the blue is the different types of units that we have. The darker blue are two bedroom units. The medium blue is the one bedroom units. And the very light blue will be the studios, which is the ADUs, but also on the second and third floor, we have two more. If you go, Pooja, to the next slide, we have studio units also on the second and third floor. This is second and third floor plan. Anything else to add, Pooja?
No, I think I'm good. Here we are again on Copenhagen Drive. We hope that you've received both the rendering as well as the scaled plan set as well that had the elevations and sections. And, you know, as we go through public comments as well as your questions, we're ready to pull up all the scale drawings and go into the weeds as much as you'd like us to, and more into the details as we need to. And so with that, we've finished our presentation, and we'll bring up additional information as you request us for, as you give us comments and as we have questions from you.
Okay, well, thank you for the presentation. I'm going to turn it back over to staff.
Yes, thank you. So, based on your staff reports, we did have a couple comments, and so we did recommend that the project be reconfigured to the extent feasible to minimize parking along the street right-of-way. Public Works and Utility have provided comments in their letter regarding working with city staff to relocate and or recess the existing drainage easement. Second one is the potential building with the ADUs as presented, and as shown in your staff report, should consist of an all-brick veneer and eliminate the big brick walls in other locations. And again, just to add sort of the variety to the project site. And then finally, we are recommending elimination of olive trees along Copenhagen and instead utilize a Brisbane box tree to provide shade and prominence. And as a Brisbane box tree is typically used as a street tree application, particularly when it comes to uprooting of sidewalks and other improvements that are maintained by the city of Solvang. So with that, I'll just turn it back to you, the DRC, and as suggested, my suggestion is to open it up to public comment, and then we can potentially respond to those comments that the public has, and then from there provide comments and direction to both the applicant and city staff.
Okay, with that said, we're going to go ahead and open it up to public comment. And do I have anyone in the room who would like to speak on this item? Please come to the podium and identify yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dennis Beebe, Solvang, and thank you, the other members, for continuing your support to our community. First impressions, I looked at this probably a total of an hour, so forgive me, and I'm no designer, but last year I took a harrowing ride on the Foothill Freeway in the LA Basin. And at one point I looked up, and looming over the freeway within a stone's throw were buildings that looked remarkably like these artist concepts that we see tonight. Yesterday, I took the Stork Road exit off 101 going south on the way to UCSB, and there's a massive apartment complex there. Wow, they look just, well, they reminded me of these artist concepts tonight. So, I don't think it's Old World Danish, and there's many details that could probably make it so. It looks like modern Danish. If you took these artist concepts and you didn't tell anybody where they were proposed to be built, could they guess it would be Solvang? You know, it would be Goleta or Santa Barbara, or maybe even Pasadena, where I saw this thing. And I'm frustrated about all the rules or all the constraints that the state has levied on you and on the community, and that is the law. However, I'm still frustrated. So if there's any constraints or any rules that are still under Solvang's control, please exercise them. I'm disturbed by the lack of parking. I'm disturbed by 30% increase of the maximum building height up to 45 feet. And I've already expressed my subjective assessment of the overall design. It's just not Old World Danish. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Any other comments in the room? Then we'll look out to Zoom. Anybody with their hand raised on Zoom there? All right, well, we'll go ahead and close the public comments, and I'll bring this item back to the committee. But I think before we start, we have comments made in regards to our role here, and I think we need to I'd like to open this discussion and go on record to provide a little bit of context here that I think is relevant. So as you're aware, the City Council recently adopted a new general plan, and Jennifer, my colleague here to my left, and I served on the General Plan Advisory Committee, the GPAC, as did Mr. Beebe. We served as representatives of the DRC. We spent nearly 4 years, and the GPAC worked on the plan, and we spent countless hours specifically discussing maximum heights and the importance of preserving view corridors. So the agreed upon and adopted 35-foot maximum building height is referenced in multiple sections of the general plan. At no point did the GPAC members suggest any deviations to this limit. To be clear, the GPAC members also included the mayor, city council member, representatives from the planning commission, business and property owners, and concerned Solvang residents. The group was led by the city manager with support from officials at the city planning department. And so throughout our discussions, there was never any indication, not a justification for exceeding the 35-foot maximum height limit. And there were no scenarios raised that warranted exceptions to this guideline. So I open the discussion with these comments this evening, and I kind of turn to my colleague on the general plan, perhaps for comments, and my colleagues up here for comments on the project. And I wanted to begin by addressing this as kind of the elephant in the room, the rules that we worked so hard to put in place and how those are and aren't being applied as the projects come forward here to us.
So I do have a clarifying question about the concessions presented and how they've been explained. Raphael, if you would. If I understand it, when an applicant does the bonus density, concessions can be given. Are the concessions dictated by the applicant, or does the city have any discretion in deciding which concessions they will give?
It's dictated by the applicant, and again, it's a health, safety, welfare issue. We have no control unless it's preponderance of evidence.
I understand that part. So the question answered is the applicant, knowing they can ask for concessions, can request the specific concession.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So that does tie our hands on,
To an extent.
Yes.
It does. So with that comment made and with the applicant kind of having a little understanding of the importance of view corridors, height limits, and how that's been applied in Solvang over many decades, there are ways of getting there, and there are ways of continuing the 3 stories and working with a 35-foot limit. There would perhaps be other concessions that could be asked for to continue working with our community to help preserve those visual corridors that you specifically mentioned.
As a quick, just sort of, not necessarily reminder, but more of a caveat to this is, while the DRC can make the comments, and which was what you're going to do, any sort of comments that reduce the amount of density is essentially a no-go. So height is a big one, particularly when it comes to density, particularly when it understandable that this is, you went through the GPAC and everything. However, our housing element in particular, which is the one that is raked through the coals by the state of California, specifically, requires we reduce the amount of government barriers, et cetera, into allowing infill development and high density development. So just kind of understanding that, while yes, you could request to have the applicant, design under 35, if the applicant comes back and basically says, hey, we can't make the density work, then that's going to be their reason and rationale. Does that make sense?
Yes, and understood that there are ways to getting to 3 stories and maintaining the density, because of course that is critical for a project to pencil out. So I'm making the applicant very aware of the great effort that's gone into maintaining the small town, and think that housing, will be a big addition and is much needed, and that there are ways of getting there without having to add 10 feet to the height. But I've been talking a lot, so yeah, I need to look at some of my other colleagues to, perhaps there's other matters to address regarding massing and design.
yeah, so I do want to say that I am very pro affordable housing and pro additional housing. Obviously, it's become a really big problem. It's not just Solvang, it's the United States of America. It seems to be a big issue everywhere. And so I really do applaud the idea of using this for the benefit of others who can then afford to rent and live and work in Solvang. So don't get me wrong, I really do want a project like this to happen. I just also feel like when we're fighting for preservation, we have to say it's not because we're stubborn or irrational
Or obstructionist.
or obstructionist. We are trying to serve the community that has asked us to preserve what is special about Solvang, and that's it. And to not be emotional about it, but to try to be objective about it, and not curry favor to one person over another, but be consistently using the same vernacular, the same standards. So I just wanted to go on the record as saying that it's the lack of my political clout that allows me to actually really serve in a very hopefully open and fair way. Having said that, let's jump into some of the other things. I think that while the materials absolutely agree, and they're there per our objective design standards, the brick and the plaster and the half timbers and even the roof, all of those things are there. What I would say is if you can take that concept of individual peak depths and differentiation to achieve something interesting relative to the roof line, please go further to differentiate the massing of the building to make it feel more of a differentiation between the buildings again. So if a word to almost create what would look like a multi-building structure. So to break up the view of the monotony of a cream-colored building with the same design on every linear or vertical facade from east, west, north, south, create some variation and some interest so that it doesn't translate to just a whitewash of stucco and brick and cross bracing or cross timbers.
There's some very good examples of that in our community too, of how to break up massing with the visual elements, changes in colors of paint.
I would suggest naming those actual buildings so that way we can direct the applicant.
I'll have to give those addresses at another time, but I can certainly provide that to Raphael to share. And if you're interested, you can look online and see those and how that breaks up the massing of a large building. There's some excellent examples in our community of that.
The only other thing I particularly wrote down was the comment about cross braces being a lack thereof because of the busyness. I hear you completely. At the same time, I think that if, again, in context of what I just said about creating some variety, maybe one building has one set of half timber cross braces design and another part of the building has fewer or different. Again, you can use the half timber design as an element to differentiate the buildings from one another or the facades from one another. So I would say, please use that to your advantage versus seeing it as a disadvantage. Anyone else right now?
Well, color can make a lot of
Yeah.
difference too.
Yeah, well, the variety of colors should be.
Yes.
Oui, this project would be wonderful maybe in Los Angeles, but it's way too modern for the old world of Solvang. And the material, metal, it's modern, brick veneer, the roof, the wall like that along the street. Is it for the noise or? It's very modern. I don't think it's fit to Solvang. Not the project at all. Very good, but for Los Angeles. Sinon, we go to the modern Copenhagen. And it's not the quaint little, town, cute and charming. It's angle, it's sharp, it's not for here. Sorry.
The comment about a lot of sharp angles, there are potentially eaves can extend the roof line to soften angles. As I look at the renderings, there's I think it's either a stairwell or an elevator that projects up high. That seems very prominent. Perhaps there's a way of softening that, maybe even making it look like it's a giant chimney. I'm not sure. That might be a place for your bricks. A very common style that you'll see in Solvang that adds square footage is the overhanging second and third stories. So they jet out over the first story. And that is specifically called out in the new general plan design guideline or design element, so that might be a reference that could be utilized for adding square footage. Juliet balconies definitely are not a Danish element. Understanding that it's great to get the fresh air, there's other ways that could be potentially incorporated. Black iron, wrought iron is good. Let's see. The timber, as Jennifer mentioned, creating a variety of designs with the timber on one section and not so much on another section, and playing that up would make a big difference in breaking up. But I think, again, the color of paint and potentially even roofing elements that vary. Although often the roofing elements will remain consistent, but yet give the buildings a look of being a village of buildings as opposed to just a big building, even though it is maybe just for Solvang, a big building. Windows, I think there's back to the guidelines that are pending in reference to the windows would make a big jump in making it look more of the old world Danish rather than the contemporary Copenhagen Danish. I applaud the utilities going underground, if I understood that to be the case. That's excellent, which isn't our purview, but will make a big difference in the area. And I think that, Pat, are there other comments?
Well, I
here?
want to indicate my support for the comments you've made, the members particularly from the General Plan Committee. And I think the 45 feet, height was discussed extensively, and it'd be nice to bring that down. And I think the closer we get to the heart of Solvang, which is, right here where this development is, the more it should. Again, I'm probably, committing the sin of subjectivity, but it has to be more Danish. And there was a statement that we're going to make efforts to have a Danish design, and I guess I agree that it's an effort, but I think it's a whiff. I think it ought to be. I love the ideas that have been posted about at least the differential colors and so forth. We're not requiring that elsewhere, but we're talking about the downtown, the area that makes Solvang special. And I think some half timbered and design that just doesn't make that. I like the standing seam roof on one hand. I mean, it's a copper. Believe me, it will, in this environment, in this atmosphere, it will not oxidize to green. Because our air is relatively cleaner than it is where there's a lot of more acid in the air, then you can expect it to oxidize to that green color. And that's an aside. But the other thing is, of course, the one thing that's very Danish is we have the windmills around town and so forth, and that's their efforts from hundreds of years ago to harness nature to generate energy. And I guess I don't have a problem putting up solar panels on those roofs. I'm surprised that's not part of the deal. It seems to me that with the technology and cost now that would help reduce the cost of the operation of living there. Again, I think it was disconcerting to me to see this. People won't be able to see it, I guess, unless the camera's on there, or if they look it up online, and they can do that. But we work and work and work, talking about what the standards ought to be, and we have what's called a requirement, and they're listed here. And we appreciate the staff's effort to be sure that the standards that we've agreed on, that have passed not only this body but also the city council, that those are the standards that we've agreed to meet. And I appreciate the staff's effort then, on occasion, to show, well, this is what the standard is, and whether the proposal complies with that standard or not. And they've added now colors. So if green, if it means it complies, red means it doesn't. I haven't seen so much red on any, and that means it doesn't mean what we jokingly call requirements. I mean, are they requirements or not? I think, again, I think there can be a lot of work. I think it's a great concept. You know, I chime in with what's been said about the importance of making sure the housing requirements for the state and for our community are met. We have some obligations there that obviously reasonable minds can disagree on, probably, but I think that we should, we have those obligations to make sure that that meets. I think where this happens to be located, right next to and adjacent to or part of the village, I think we should expect it to have, and I think we do normally. It's not the same standards. You know, I think we should expect more than what this proposal is.
I want to echo that, applauding having low-income units and much-needed housing. And this project will be an improvement to an area of Copenhagen Drive that is sadly dilapidated at this time. So we're looking forward to a new project. The other item that I noted that was a real positive is that it's set down below the street level, which will help with bringing that visual kind of obstruction that's going to happen. You mentioned our beautiful mountains. That's why, you know, I said what I said, and that's why we have these conversations, you know, a lot. Anything that can be done to lower it would be a plus. Understanding that you want to maintain the density in the 3 stories. It seemed as though they've been able to successfully do that with a new project that's being built around the corner, and I think maybe even involves some of the designers that are here today, the one on Oak Street, and yes. So we know that there are ways you can do it, which is what inspired those comments. A couple of other notes. The barrier between Copenhagen and the courtyard that you have envisioned with the water feature and landscaping keeps that visual corridor open, but keeps privacy within. Very nice feature, and I think being water there, as long as we don't have a drought real soon again. The sound of water to dampen the noise of the highway, which isn't very noisy at night around here, but still that would be a bonus. An art wall, that'll be interesting to see as that becomes more defined. Curious about what is in mind. One note in our image with the art wall, that as you described it, there's a kind of old-fashioned light fixture. Those won't work in Solvang because of having to have shielded light bulbs. So, and you're probably aware of that, or certainly will be by the time a lighting plan is in place. You've heard a lot of comments from us and from our community member who spoke out. I would like to ask if you have more questions to ask of us. Can I do that? Can I open it back up for comments from the applicant?
Yeah, again, this is a pre-application, so the more feedback and sort of this back and forth is welcomed.
Yeah.
Because again, we play by a different set of rules comparative to a formal application.
Good. So applicant, do you have questions, comments? Please, you know.
Thank you for those comments. We've written those down. So, you know, if what would be really helpful is to receive those addresses that you were mentioning, which sort of help towards creating multiple roof types and break the mass down even more. That would be really helpful to receive those addresses. we've of course walked through and taken multiple photographs of Solvang, done an extensive amount of research, and of course we're not there yet according to you. So, we will go back to the drawing board. With respect to height, so, there is, of course, once you start to, try and put things within 35 feet, you start to lose units, you start to lose density. And you either see that, to make up the density, you either see losing open space, because it's, somewhere it starts to give. And so that part becomes really challenging to address. So, we're going to go back and try our level best. However, I hope you also realize that if we keep things within 35 feet, it impacts open space and it impacts sort of that courtyard we've created. And we've tried really hard to create buildings within the landscape where we can, as much as possible. We will go back to the drawing board, try and push and pull and do what we need to with respect to the overhangs that you're requesting. We'll go back and take a look at the window proportions, work with the eaves more. Funny enough, we don't intend to use copper here. We intended to use a color of patina copper to the standing seam metal roof. In fact, there is one particular building on Mission Drive that uses these 3 color principles. And so we were looking at that building on Mission Drive as a way of taking a look at the project as well. And a lot of the proportions actually of the windows as well came from a few buildings in Mission Drive. So it's not for the lack of trying. However, we will go back to the drawing board. There's nothing else I can say other than we're going to try. However, density is sort of density, and we didn't go with a base density of 16, which would get us to 32 units. Or 34 units. With the R3, we're still working with DR20, with the sort of 26 units, if you will, and we hope we can at least try and get that number. We're not maximizing it to the 34 number. So I hope there is a balance between how we're perceiving the project. And, we're going to try our level best, and we look forward to your guidance as we continue to do so.
Thank you. I also wanted to note that I did remember a couple of those places. One of them is Royal Copenhagen Inn, which is
Yes.
on Mission Drive. It's kind of it looks kind of like a little village. The other building, I don't know the number of it, but you would. It's the one on First Street across from the Water Wheel Building with the Dragon Spire Tower. You know how that was one of our very early projects. Just King Frederick's Court, I believe it's called, on First Street. Just the aesthetic of being one building, but appearance of being multiples. And at first, we don't really have we don't have a say over parking, but at first, I really didn't love the fact that the parking kind of was straight down fourth place, but I wanted to compliment you on that. After thinking about it, how it does keep the visual open as you travel up and down Mission Drive. You aren't looking that way and seeing a big, tall building. You're looking that way and seeing a tall building with a view through to the mountains that we all love around here. So that was an aspect that seems nice. And one comment that was in the staff report about isolating the use of bricks to the ADU, I don't feel like that needs to be the case. but breaking up the use so it isn't so consistent through the project would enhance it and fit more within the kind of Danish village design character.
Yeah, I second
Can I ask a question? So you've seen that we've sort of taken that brick a little bit, from the base and then taking it up, higher in some portions, especially where the building recesses back a little bit. The idea there was to break the monolithicness of the facade. Do you like that?
That would not really fit within the design guidelines as much. It would be more that it would be on the first story, and then above it would be the timbered appearance. Yeah, and if you check out and perhaps you've already done this, within the new general plan, there's the community design element that specifically goes into some of these characteristics in the Danish design. What's it called? The Danish village area design element, I believe. Spent enough time on it, I should know that. But there's some good references there.
Sure. We didn't think that within the village historic core there was sort of a 3-story multifamily housing building, and this is the first of its kind. Am I wrong to assume that, or if I'm missing something, please let us know.
No, the applicant's correct. This is actually the first multifamily
3-story.
in the adopted design district.
Yes, in the adopted design district. Correct. Yeah.
One thing while I have both of you here, the DRC has expressed the wish to bring down the heights, and the applicant has expressed that affects density, and I agree with the applicant, it does. However, I would actually like to drill down a little bit deeper to really give the applicant the ability here is they did mention the reduction of open space. And so again, this is all dependent on what standard gets utilized. If it's submitted tomorrow, which it won't, but I'm just playing devil's advocate here, an exception would be needed for meeting the open space requirements, which in the DR20 is quite extensive for high-density housing. It's virtually unheard of in today's age versus 1989, which is when these were thought of, versus the proposed R3 standards, which this project well exceeds the open space requirement with the combination of private balconies and the common open space. So with that being said, assuming that the applicant does go through utilizing the new standards, would the DRC be amenable to a reduction of the courtyard space as long as it obviously, hopefully meets the objective standard in order to reduce the heights?
I would.
I have an opinion on this. I absolutely would be. 'Cause
Yeah, I would too.
here's the thing. When you think about what we talked about infill in the village in terms of multi-use and property, what we talked about was the village itself is entertainment, right? It is living in a quasi village environment. So you're walking and you're eating out and you're living in a village like you would in any village, right? So you don't need as much courtyard or potentially as open because you're choosing to be in a
Downtown.
more downtown environment. So yes, I say yes
Yeah,
for that reason.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yes, and I
just want
and
to show something. That's the old world. That's the project.
well, that's even a contemporary look at the old world with the color.
Yeah.
The height element, as I was looking at the plan, I believe we were looking at it as 12 feet for the first floors, 10 feet for the second, and 10 feet for the third with the roof. Am I thinking correctly on that, Raphael?
So back in August, I did present that to the DRC, to which I had a lot of comments back. And in reviewing that, the video, I did say I would come back and we'd make it back to 35. However, again, going back to our adopted housing element, going back to the actual policies of the land use element, and as I've pointed out in your staff report, there are 3 policies that are big in there: promoting infill development, reducing government barriers, promoting multi-unit housing. So in the document that goes to the Planning Commission, I'm hoping to tweak that based on, again, utilizing the applicant, and thank you again to the applicant for letting them be my guinea pig, because it has tested out a couple of these objective standards, and there will be changes based on sort of this, what came about, which shows you how a code can be fluid. So one of those changes is that on purely residential projects, reducing that first floor height down to 10. So now you get a minimum height of 10 feet, max height 10 feet on the upper stories could get you where you need to go. And then potentially, at one time we had proposed doing a 35, 45, 50. From there, the max roof height can exceed the 35, but can exceed it by no more than 5 feet. Staircases and elevators would be the one exception.
Correct.
Because those need to be 8. And so
Yes.
this is something that I brainchild today. And if the DRC is okay with that, this is what we want to carry forward. Now,
Yes.
that exception will only be for residential projects only, or residential projects that in a mixed-use project that is over, I believe, I'm going to tie it into state law, where I believe it's a 2/3. Don't quote me on this, Dave. It's either 2/3 or half. If it's majority of residential, based on the floor area, it could use that. But if it's not, it's got to be, the first floor's got to be 12. And the reason and rationale behind that is you want the ability to have flexible spaces, higher ceilings on the first floor, and then again, using the elements of the old world Danish, having that 10 feet is about the max you can go on that second floor, but having sort of that modern twist to it. And then obviously a couple little things. The brick was a good discussion, to which I've noted here that needs to get changed out. But again, if that's something that's amenable to DRC, we'd like to see that change carried forward at the Planning Commission. Because again, the idea is that particularly when it comes to majority multifamily projects that we want to see in the village, the 35-foot threshold is really hard to meet. It's hard to meet the densities, and it's hard to meet the math, the economics, more so than anything else. And doing these sort of changes goes a long way in HCD's eyes, the next housing element go around, so they don't club us over the head that we need to go do something because we haven't done anything in 4 housing cycles.
Yeah, and I think that's why I said that there's ways of getting there and being close to the 35 feet, and I have confidence that this team is sensitive to what we're saying. We've seen that before, and we appreciate that very much. And applaud the project going forward. We wish you had a really big budget and could do subterranean parking and have a really nice big 2-story area, which I highly encourage, understanding that may not quite pencil out for your project at the same time. So were there any other questions? I think I saw somebody else on, the other representative on Zoom there. No? Okay.
I do want to say, when you get to a product type like multifamily housing, and where you are in Solvang, especially with location, there is the requirement of light and air and creating a sense of community and having common spaces as well. So as much as I respect the comment of, we're in an urban environment, that is also contextual in nature with respect to sort of where we are in both California, within Solvang in itself as well, and to create a multifamily housing that can sort of support a lively community as well. And this is a new product type that you're having within the village district. So we're going to try our level best to go back to the drawing board and do what we need to, but we do need to have, meet all of the requirements of providing light and air and lovely common open space as well as private open space.
Appreciate that, and it will be a big improvement, and we're looking forward to housing being there, and we're looking forward to maybe having the opportunity to look at what comes up next. Thank you for listening to our comments.
Thank you so much.
Oh, back to me.
Yeah. So just really quick, what are the next steps, just so the DRC understands, as well as the applicant? Our next steps are as follows. We're going to take the comments that you have, put it in a letter format, and send that back out as a complete package to the applicant. That includes your comments, our comments, Public Works and Utilities, because they have some technical comments on the landscaping plans and water and sewer and those things. For the applicant, they paid the fee, so they most certainly can request a meeting with city staff, and we'll go over our comments and discuss and any clarifications. But from this point, it would be up to the applicant in terms of responding to the comments and providing all the required drawings and technical studies required to make a complete submittal. And at the time of complete submittal, depending on what code they're in, it will be dependent if it comes back to the DRC, et cetera, and what that planning process will look like. So those are the next steps for this project. But again, I want to thank the applicant very much for working with city staff. I know it was a little bit longer than anticipated to get this, simply because it was a very complicated project, and I do want to thank the DRC for their comments and openness on this project. I know state density bonus projects tend to be a lot more complicated.
And just kind of to one last comment about how this is such an unusual project. It's kind of the bridge between the TRC, the TRC and the housing, and it really is a bridge in such a visible area. So thank you for all your consideration. Okay, so I think now we move on to, with no vote necessary here, to committee member comments. Any comments here? Okay, I do have one comment. I did meet with Councilmember Robert Clark. We had a little conversation, which was kind of inspired by some of his remarks at a recent city council meeting when there will be, which was about the role of our committee, and I believe that will be coming back to city council at a future date. When that happens, Robert tells me that won't be for a while, but perhaps staff has something different to say. Please, my request for staff is that you inform us in good time that that is on the agenda so that we may be present to listen and potentially comment. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I would also, when it comes to that time, this committee was formed after the Board of Architectural Review was, I don't think disbanded is probably the right word. Yeah. And a new committee was born with mostly the same, pretty much the same responsibilities, just a new name. Since that happened, we have never, as a committee, had an opportunity to ever report to the council, nor has the council ever inquired about our work. With the previous city manager, I did ask, Pat, I believe it was you and I asked.
We've met.
And we were told that we were not allowed to do that. So I would like to ask if that is allowable and if we, at some point, may report on, what our group is doing here or our role or our, just kind of to give a little bit of feedback on how that works. And maybe the attorneys need to chime in.
I was going to say, I would ask the attorney to chime in on whether or not it's allowable.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be tonight. This is for future conversation.
And it doesn't have to be the group, obviously, as well.
Yes.
I mean, but what we did as chair and vice chair, met with the city manager regularly before every meeting, and it tuned in, that way. And I guess occasionally then also to city council meetings.
Yeah. But
Well, if I understand your question, is it appropriate for the DRC as a whole to report to the council? I think the short answer could be yes. I think you can have that two-way conversation. It's just a question of how you get to that conversation, whether you meet with the council and have a joint meeting with them, or whether you, as part of your DRC agenda, put together some report. Meeting outside the DRC with three of you obviously would be a problem under the Brown Act. So you would just need to agendize it at the DRC and come up with whatever you wish to transmit to the council.
would it be appropriate for the chair and vice chair to do that, though? So it's 2 of the 5 members?
If the rest of the DRC is comfortable with that, because I don't want to call it a danger. The concern about that is that the 2 may not speak for the 5. If the 2 have the consent of the 5 to speak on behalf of the DRC, then it's not an issue. But if something gets lost in translation, then the other 3 members of the DRC may feel that they've not had their voices heard.
Understood. Thank you.
So jumping on that, I would ask that rather than maybe have a formal presentation, that in advance of the agendized discussion, that either the representatives or the DRC have a joint meeting to discuss any concerns or questions or thoughts about the body, so that there is some kind of context before a separate discussion without all of the facts that bear on what we do every month.
Yes.
We can make that happen.
Thank you. We all want another meeting.
Yeah, obviously, when it does
Don't
come,
hear a second.
when it does come before the council, there'll be all the normal public notices and things. And, ultimately, it's a council decision. Staff does not have a recommendation in that regard. It is a council request that had the consensus of the entire, well, it was a majority vote, I guess.
Yeah.
On bringing it back. So it will not come, probably not come until after the first of the new calendar year.
That was my assumption,
Right.
simply because we've got an election and a very busy calendar, and that, I
Right.
believe, would suit all of us. Also, I believe our service here on this committee comes,
Expires, or
yeah,
term ends in December.
yeah, I think that is
It's already
across.
up again?
Yeah, I think it's across the board. We
Yeah.
all 5 are up.
I haven't
correct?
looked at it. Normally in a body like this, it would be staggered.
Yeah, except we all started, I think,
I
at
think they
the
all
same
start at the
time.
same time. We'd have to look into it.
Yeah, will you
Ultimately,
please
yeah.
look into that and inform us of that too, so we know as well?
Yeah.
And I think it's, well,
might
maybe
be a
this is
moot
the same for
point.
Planning Commission, I don't know.
Yeah, because planning's been operational for months,
Yeah, that's true.
consistently.
Yeah.
Yes, please report back to us, if you would, on that, when our terms are up. Any other comments, committee members? Okay, finally, city staff comments.
I had a couple of things announcing, if you've not been, if you haven't heard, or reminding if you have. State of the City is Friday the 27th, so next Friday, a week from tomorrow, at the Cork House, 11
Yes, something like that.
11 to 1:30 or something like that, I think is the scheduled time. It's on the Chamber's website, and there have been notices posted on social media. So be there if you want to hear what's going on. Also, I was at a meeting yesterday with included group of other city managers, and the city manager of Goleta reported for the last 2 council meetings, they've been Zoom bombed. So I wanted to alert this group and also the attorney online that it seems to be happening again. Obviously, the polarization at the national political scene is emboldening people like this. So be aware, we do have a Zoom bombing policy, and to the extent you need to be refreshed on it, staff can certainly provide it to the chair and vice chair should the need arise, but I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. And that's all that I have.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Randy. Quick planning manager update. So to answer your question about when your term expires, it expires at the end of the year for all 5 of you.
Yeah.
Per the
thought
municipal
so.
code.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. You and I think you were faster than me on that one. So, update for next month. We have no items for October so far. So I know it's quite shocking, isn't it? I also have no items for the Planning Commission. And the reason being is Dave and his staff, Chelsea as well, and Taylor, have been working feverishly and putting me to work on a whole bunch of numbers and GIS layers and all the fun things to cross our T's and dot our I's for our zoning ordinance update. So actually, I really do appreciate it. We are hoping to get that to the November meeting, so that way it goes to City Council and be in place by the beginning of 2025. So we have some consistency with general plan and be good with state law that requires us to get this done in 6 months. So other things that are going on in the city, we don't have many applications that are before us. We have a couple pre-apps that are finishing up. You had one this evening that was very much ready to get comments back, but we actually do have a pre-application in our hands. Lisa's working on that one. It's the water wheel building. So they're proposing to demolish the actual water wheel portion of it and then reconstruct a new commercial building and then basically finish off a commercial TI and put another hotel there. So it's kind of with the old previous 2013, 14 approval. However, their pre-application is very rudimentary, so it won't come before you because it's really not much to look at. So our review will be very much higher level in terms of infrastructure and does it meet code and et cetera. But if they do propose to move forward with it in a formal application, we will probably recommend doing another pre-app just so it actually gets well fleshed out before y'all. And then finally, myself and Lisa have been working with Wildan, our consultant party building officials, and we are actually beginning the workings to revamp our building permit processing. It's something I've been working on since I've started here. So currently, if you don't know this, we actually only intake building permits on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 days out of the week. That's actually going to change because we are going to flip to all digital submittals, which means all of our plan sets will now be digitized, and we'll require that. And so we'll be taking them via email and or through Dropbox and other means. And we will actually be now intaking plans 5 days out of the week. We can be issuing plans as well once they've been reviewed and approved by our building official, building crew remotely. But again, this is a much larger effort by Randy since he's gotten here, by myself, to really, again, be more flexible with our customers and our residents and be more accessible to them and being able to quickly expedite things such as our re-roofs and water heaters, and those things are really easy over the counter that Lisa, myself, and our future staff members should be able to do very quickly and expediently. So these are changes. While they're not monumental, they are helping every little bit to keep our residents going at the speed of light versus just 2 days out of the week. So with that, if you have any questions, that's all I got.
Questions? All right. I will adjourn the meeting at 6:39.